Tonight's story begins with a transaction, not a romance. Charles Woodward, wealthy, efficient, alone pays Antoinette, a homeless woman, to carry his child. What he expects is control. What he meets is courage, candor, and the quiet power of a mother-to-be. As months pass, the contract that seemed to protect him exposes what he's been avoiding: intimacy, responsibility, and the possibility of love. When the delivery room reveals not one heartbeat but three, Charles must choose and force the deal, or become the man he's never allowed himself to be. This is a tale of money, mercy, and a family born by choice. Rain combs the window into pale ribs of light. I keep the lamp low so the room feels smaller than my mistakes. On the desk, a dented silver tube, a cedar matchbox, and 3 plastic hospital bracelets looped together like a chain for sparrows. The letters have faded: Baby A, Baby B, Baby C, but the plastic remembers tiny wrists. One clasp still carries a purple smudge from a nurse's glove, the only honest color in the room. Inside the tube lies a contract browned at the edges. I have held a match to it more times than I admit close enough to make the corner curl. Never close enough to finish. Paper was how I won. 16 pages, clauses that locked from my side, signatures that sounded like courage in the right room. I told the world I did it for legacy. Men like me keep words like that polished so we can carry loneliness without naming it. In private I said love, though what I trusted was custody. I hired Victor Hale, smile that never reached his teeth, and ordered something clean. He delivered a crib made of clauses. On the last page, 2 lines waited: Charles Woodward and the woman I intended to forget. Say her name, Antoinette. I first saw her under the river bridge. Blue coat cinched against weather, tying a bootlace with ribbon like someone who refuses to be undone by the wrong kind of string. She wore dignity the way some wear jewelry, obvious to those who know how to look, invisible to those who don't. I open the tube. The paper slides into my palm with the dry hiss of a polite threat. My name sits at the top in a blue I chose so certainty would look good against it. The party of the first part shall assume sole custodial determination. The sentence is furniture. It fits the room. It does not fit a life. I lay the contract beside the bracelets so lie and proof can share a table. The plastic clicks. Beneath the rain I hear another sound. The ultrasound counting 3 heartbeats like a chord you don't deserve to hear twice. In that dim room the doctor smiled, the nurse swore softly, and Antoinette closed her eyes as if bracing for weather. Triplets. Paper did not prepare me for plurality. Why brown and not ash? Each time the match bloomed. The voice I trained for boardrooms reported for duty. Be sensible. Protect your interests. Finish the structure. That voice negotiated shipyards and mayors. It kept me fed. It kept me small. Burning is drama, it said. Tearing is childish. I blew the flame out, tasted the chemicals of almost, and called restraint virtue. There is a smaller drawer under the matches. An envelope lives there, heavy with a letter I did not read for years, my mother's hand sloping across the front. Later you will hear what it says and why it undid me. For now know this. A boy who learned to keep drawers closed became a man who mistook secrecy for strength and paid a woman to carry his future, because payment was the only language he could speak without stuttering. When I was 11, our gardener, Mr. Whitlow, taught me how plants read hands. He saved 3 strawberries past their proper day and placed them in my palm like small red truths. Late fruit might save your life if you let it, he said. He died that winter. I stood by a rake leaning against brick and thought, if I tug the handle hard enough, the noise will wake him. I did not tug. I learned to hold still and call it respect. I turned that stillness into policy. Back at the hospital, where the world split into 3, Victor produced a postnatal addendum, standard. He said that would sever Antoinette cleanly. Clean is a trick word. I let silence perform consent. She looked at me and understood faster than any judge. "Don't make my babies a transaction," she said. The words lodged where the matches live. I did not burn the contract that night. I brought it home like contraband courage and placed it next to the bracelets, as if proximity to truth could launder intent. The house returned to its practiced quiet. The window reflected a man who had confused being correct with being kind. If there is redemption here, it begins with that reflection and the knowledge that the only honest color in the room belonged to someone else's work. I wish I could tell you I tore the pages then and there. I didn't. I turned the lamp off, put the match back in its cedar box, and rehearsed the oldest mistake, pretending morning can choose what night refuses to decide. The bracelets clicked once in the dark like a warning too small for a man like me to hear the first time. So here is the confession, kept plain. I paid a homeless woman to have my child. I designed paperwork to erase her afterward. I nearly succeeded. What stopped me was not principle or fear of headlines. It was those 3 identical bands and the memory of 3 heartbeats arguing gently, relentlessly, that counting is not the same as caring. I am telling this now not to be forgiven, but to be accurate. Accuracy is the first mercy, and tonight I mean to practice mercy with the same care I once reserved for control. If you stay, I'll tell you how a contract came apart in a family. Began, how a letter I avoided opened like weather and changed the air. How a man who measured everything in units learned to hold weight he could not quantify. But first we must go backward to the house that taught me quiet, to the ledger that dressed itself as love, to the rake I never tugged. What kind of man pays for life, and who does he become when the bill comes due? If you want to understand the decisions a man makes at 50, you have to walk back with him to the first rooms he learned to breathe in. So picture this, a house that looks like it knows how to keep secrets. Marble floors that echo when a boy tries to tiptoe. A chandelier like a constellation hung too low. Portraits in heavy frames watching with the same cool patience as bank vaults. The Woodward house had quiet wealth polished, insured, and professionally dusted. The only sound at dinner was the soft ring of silver on porcelain and the coughed-up numbers of a father who ran his empire the way some men run their prayers. Daily, exact, and without witnesses. Charles sat to the left of that father, 2 chairs down from an empty seat that had once belonged to a woman who sent birthday cards with crisp notes folded inside. The cards stopped before Charles learned long division. Grief wasn't discussed. It was budgeted. After that, the family table arranged itself around absence like furniture around a fireplace that never burned. If his father ever smiled, it was on the days a quarterly report came back a little better than expected. Numbers were the language of the house. Charles learned early how to translate. He could read a face the way he read an invoice line items, overages, margin. He learned to ask for what could be quantified and to keep quiet about what couldn't. His father never said, "I love you," the way other fathers did. He said, "We're solvent." He said, "We're ahead of schedule." He said, "Your handwriting is legible." Praise came in the currency of order. One afternoon, when Charles was 8, the school cafeteria lady handed him too much change. He noticed before he reached the door. He carried the coins back like contraband, clearing his throat as if confession required a witness. At home, he told his father the story and placed the same number of coins on the dining table, reenacting virtue with exact figures and careful palms. His father looked up from a ledger he'd brought to dinner, one eyebrow lifting in what passed in that household for warmth. "Good," he said, as if Charles had folded a napkin properly. "Remember this, son. Efficiency is love." He said it like a blessing. The words descended like policy. And in the mind of a boy who had no mother's arms to argue otherwise, a cold creed took root. Efficiency is love. Return what's extra. Don't ask for more. Keep everything neat, especially your heart. But every policy meets a corner of the world that refuses to obey. For Charles, that corner was a patch of soil behind the greenhouse, where the estate's aging gardener tended the roses as if they had middle names. Mr. Whitlow moved slowly, a man carved out of seasons instead of years. He whistled to tomato vines and apologized to thorns when they found his thumb. He called the boy Charlie in a voice that sounded like warm bread. No one else did. "Come here," Whitlow would say, lifting a leaf to show him the tiny, green constellations that would ripen into strawberries. Plants don't read ledgers, they read hands. He was the one kind adult who never asked Charles to be profitable. He let him ruin his shoes in the soil. He showed him how to water, early, when the day is still making up its mind. He placed a berry into Charles's palm with a wink and said, "You don't tell the kitchen about these. The kitchen has rules. We're making something sweeter." In those hours, Charles learned what it felt like to be welcomed without needing to offer or return. He learned the weight of a strawberry in a clean hand is a kind of truth. He learned a different arithmetic, the way a small act multiplies in the chest, the way a presence can turn a long day into a shorter one. But childhood has a habit of testing what it teaches. One January morning, when the hedges wore frost, like lace and the greenhouse glass blinked back the cold sun, Mr. Whitlow did not come down the path. Charles waited with his breath in a halo until he couldn't feel his nose. He waited until waiting hardened into knowing. Later, there was a tidy funeral where the priest's voice rose and fell like a predictable market. The roses were trimmed back, the beds raked level. At dinner, Charles tried to name a feeling that had no column. He cleared his throat the way he had when he returned the cafeteria change. "Mr. Whitlow," he began. His father didn't look up. "I've arranged for a replacement." "It's not the same," Charles said, and surprised himself by how quickly the words came. "He showed me. Everyone is replaceable," his father replied, tapping a tidy fingertip against a figure that balanced perfectly at the bottom of a page. "What matters is continuity." That night, Charles took a strawberry from the refrigerator and stared at it until it warmed in his palm and went soft. He tried to write the loss down in a language his father might read. He found only this: "What I love can vanish without a receipt." Boarding school arrived like a long hallway that never ended. Charles learned the art of distance. He was genial, punctual, and rarely quoted out of context. He joined clubs the way a smart investor diversifies: debate, rowing, student council. He learned to win by anticipating, to lose without looking surprised. He excelled at deals before he ever signed one, trading his dessert for 4 days of borrowed notes, arranging a roommate switch so clean the housemaster admired the paperwork. Teachers loved his discipline. Boys remembered his competence. He collected partnerships the way some boys collected scars, tokens of contact that never broke the skin. When other students wrote letters home that began with ache and ended with "I miss you," Charles sent notes that read like status updates. "My marks are strong," he wrote. "My shoes require resoling. The bursar says the deposit settled." His father responded with wire transfers and brief signatures. When the headmaster praised Charles for mediating a dorm dispute, his father's reply arrived on crisp stationery: "Proud of your conflict resolution. Consider law." Beneath that, a smaller line: "Opportunity in Halifax Logistics Hub. Watch that space." On the rare weekends he returned to the house with the chandelier and the portraits, Charles wandered the grounds and avoided the greenhouse, now tended by a younger man who whistled a different tune. At the kitchen door, an old terracotta pot still sat where Whitlow had kept it. The new gardener used it for bolts. Charles touched the rim and got a smear of grease on his thumb that he wiped away methodically with a napkin. Efficiency is love, he reminded himself, like a boy stretching a blanket over both shoulders when the wind sneaks under the sill. College kept the training intact: economics, case competitions, Internships that began on time and ended with more keys than he came with. When a professor told him he had a gift for seeing the skeleton of a problem, Charles smiled politely and made a note to build muscle later. He didn't date much, and when he did, he was careful with restaurants that accepted reservations, conversations that had conclusions. In his mid-20s, between the end of one quarter and the beginning of another, a woman moved into his life the way music moves into a quiet room, uninvited, undeniable. She laughed with her whole face and wore a blue scarf even in spring. She taught at a community center and didn't check her phone at dinner. When she asked him about his childhood, he told her about the greenhouse and a man named Whitlow who could make roses grow where everyone else saw thorns. When she asked him about love, he told her about efficiency. He didn't know it sounded like weather reports to a person who had learned to measure warmth by something other than thermostats. He brought her gifts that were more solution than surprise, the exact coffee grinder she'd once mentioned, a calendar that integrated 3 platforms, flights that optimized time zones. He learned her schedule and wove his around it perfectly. He mistook choreography for closeness. One evening, after he'd solved a problem she hadn't asked him to fix, she set down her fork and looked at him a long time. "I never felt seen," she said softly, "only assessed." He watched the words fall between them like a glass he couldn't catch. He reached for numbers, for arguments that compared this to that, for graphs in the air to prove his devotion. She smiled sadly in a way he would see in reflective surfaces for years. Then she left. When people at work asked why it ended, he said something benign about diverging schedules. In truth, it was his first grown failure, and it didn't fit into any report he knew how to file. The world rewarded him anyway. He was a Woodward, and the Woodwards understood freight and steel, buildings and bonds. Logistics came first, routes drawn like veins across a map, warehouses arranged like commas that kept sentences moving. Real estate next, properties acquired at the angle where neighborhoods begin to introduce themselves to ambition. Private equity followed by improve, exit, all with a handshake that looked like a promise and a timeline that always matured. He became the heir apparent before the chair was even warm, in boardrooms that smelled faintly of leather and weathered. Risk, Charles learned to hear opportunity over noise. Trade winds shifted, he adjusted sails. He cut losses as cleanly as a surgeon. He kept growth curves elegant. Newspapers printed his name as if it were a case study. Employees nodded in elevators. Bankers smiled with both sides of their mouths. He was admired and untouched, like a sculpture people photograph but do not lean on. At charity galas, he wrote checks that glowed on screens the size of theater curtains. He understood that generosity, properly administered, moves reputations faster than freight. Still, when the applause faded, he felt the old, uncounted quiet creep in behind his collar. He would return to his apartment high above the city where the lights looked like ideas and the refrigerator hummed with the patience of a machine that believes in mornings. That's when the questions began to arrive, punctual and uninvited, around 3 in the morning. He didn't think of them as panic. He disliked words he couldn't amortize. He called them reviews, midnight audits of a life that proved profitable on every sheet, except the one he avoided naming. What's left when the numbers stop adding up? What is the yield on a day you spend with no one you'd choose to disappoint? How do you measure a silence that isn't restful? He tried answers. He expanded a fund. He bought a painting. He called a friend who knew how to laugh at the right pitch. He scheduled a medical check. The numbers responded to him, obedient as ever. The question returned anyway, softer each time, which made it harder to ignore. One winter night, snow shouldering down from a sky that refused to decide between weather and confession, Charles drove himself instead of letting the driver. He liked the control of it, the way the wipers obeyed his timing. The city was a series of parentheses, streets narrowed by parked cars, thoughts tucked between obligations. At a red light near a church that still rang real bells, he saw her. The coat got his attention first. Blue against all that white, a blue so honest it made the snow look like an excuse. She stood under a street lamp with her hands tucked into the opposite sleeves, hair tucked messily beneath a knit cap that had lost a fight with the wind. She wasn't asking. She wasn't advertising. She simply existed in equation with too many givens and not enough time. They made eye contact for half a second, no more, no less. Something stuttered in his chest, that old patch of soil refusing winter. The light changed. Cars behind him reminded him that time moves even when you don't. He eased forward. He told himself he had somewhere to be and a meeting in the morning. He told himself he wasn't the man who rolled down windows. He told himself a story about boundaries that sounded sensible in an empty car. Before he turned the corner, he checked the rear view and saw only snow. Later, at home, he told himself the city holds thousands of blue coats. He told himself there would be another chance. He brushed his teeth the way a man does when he's convincing himself he didn't just leave a room he should have entered. He slept fitfully and woke before the alarm, the refrigerator humming its hymn. He opened a spreadsheet and watched the cells gather like soldiers on parade. He clicked until the numbers formed a fence. It held until it didn't. By then, he knew how to sign anything. He knew how to purchase time, redirect risk, escort a crisis to a quiet exit. He didn't yet know how the question would corner him. But life is efficient in this one way. It returns us to the lesson we declined to learn, dressed in a new coat, standing under a different lamp. And so we arrive at the question that would drape itself over the back of every chair he owned, follow him into every boardroom and whisper to him on every winter night until he answered it poorly, then properly, then at last. If a man never learned to be held, what will he trade to never be alone again? Rain makes a city honest. It strips the gloss, sends the proud indoors, and gathers the rest beneath whatever roof the world forgot to claim. That night, Charles finally stopped. The underpass on 9th held a small congregation of wet cardboard and steam-breathed bodies. He saw her the way a spotlight finds a stage alone, back against a concrete pillar, tying one boot with a shoelace. Made from ribbon. Blue eyes guarded. Cheekbones cut by weather and stubbornness. The ribbon was satin once, the kind sold to pretty up gifts for people who didn't need them. "Do you need a ride?" he asked, voice too formal for the rain. Or something warm. She didn't look up at first. "Warm is a category," she said, mouth barely moving. "Which part?" "Soup," he said, surprising himself. "A blanket." She lifted her gaze, testing him for small print. "A name?" "Charles." She nodded, as if that proved nothing and everything. "Antoinette. Bred before business. Whitlow would have liked that." Charles drove 3 blocks to a diner that trusted storms to turn a profit. He ordered chicken noodle, extra bread, and a blanket from his trunk he'd bought after a board retreat went sideways in the mountains. When he returned, he felt the ledger in his head reaching for columns. Cost, time, risk. He set the bag down and told the ledger to shut up. "Eat first," he said. Antoinette took the soup like a truce. Steam rose around her face, softening. Edges grime had sharpened. She broke the bread with her thumbs and waited until the 3rd spoonful to speak. "Kindness with a receipt is debt," she said, not accusing quoting a rule she'd learned by losing. "If I have to pay you back in a way you've already calculated, it stops being kind." The words found their mark. He stood there, damp and disarmed, a man who knew term sheets better than truths. "No receipt," he said. "Good," she murmured, and finished the bowl as the rain drummed its steady percussion overhead. He should have left it there, a clean exchange, the nobility of not returning, a story to tell himself later when he wanted to believe he had a heart. But the thought he hated arrived with the discipline of a calendar reminder, his silent penthouse, the reflection of his own shape in every black window, and somewhere inside it, a child's laugh that didn't yet exist. The ache surprised him, then angered him by how unsurprising it felt. He'd built a life where everything added up. Suddenly, the sum sounded empty. "Come inside," he said, meaning the car. "At least to a hotel. Dry off." She shook her head. "Shelter's in the morning if you're early. And they know me there. You trust them?" She wrapped the blanket tighter. "More than men who stop under bridges." "Fair," he said, and left his card in the paper bag. "Victor Halley, he's my attorney. If you need anything, call him. You always outsource mercy?" She asked, not unkindly. "I schedule it," he said. She let out a breath that might have been a laugh and wasn't. "Good night, Charles." 2 days later, the rain cleared, and the dealmaker returned to form. In a conference room where everything was polished to the point of reflection, Victor Heil slid a stack of paper across the table like a sacrament. The contract read like it had been engineered to survive a siege: lawful, airtight, sterile, compensation parameters, non-disclosure, comprehensive medical provisions, housing, security protocols. A surrogacy-style arrangement without the pretense of romance or the clutter of marriage. "Clean," Victor said. "Standard in jurisdictions that allow it." "There's nothing standard about this," Charles said, and heard, unhelpfully, Whitlow in the back of the room. They met Antoinette at dusk, the windows glossed with a city that liked to look expensive after 5. She arrived wearing a thrift store blue coat that changed how she occupied the doorway. Still guarded, but chosen. She sat, eyes flicking over the room art in the corners, water in glass, men who mistook confidence for warmth. Victor began his calm recital of clauses. When he finished, he pushed the pen forward. Antoinette didn't touch it. "My conditions," she said, and lifted her chin as if she were reading from a page only she could see. "Respect. Housing that locks from the inside, not the outside. Autonomy in medical decisions. No paparazzi. No press release that turns me into a cause or a villain. And prenatal care at the community clinic on 17th. I trust them." Victor adjusted his tie. "The clinic is modest. That's code for we don't own it," she said. "It's where women call each other by their names." Charles felt, absurdly, the urge to apologize for a world he benefited from. "Done," he said, before the reflex to negotiate could stretch. She turned the pages. "This clause," she said, tapping near the end. "Sole custody to Charles after birth. Financial severance to me, no contact unless he extends it. You made it look tidy, but it's a knife." "It's customary in arrangements of this kind," Victor replied, all poise. "Clarity prevents conflict." Antoinette looked at Charles, not Victor. "You don't want a family," she said, her voice a steady match in a dark room. "You want an heir." He opened his mouth and found only well-rehearsed sentences. "I can provide stability, education, safety. You can buy those," she said. "You can't buy showing up." The room couldn't hold her truth. It echoed in corners money usually quieted. She pushed her chair back and stood. "Thank you for the soup," she said. "No thanks for the receipt." Then she left, the blue coat closing behind her like a door. Charles stayed where he was until the ice in the water melted. Victor cleared his throat, meaning control yourself. "We can find another candidate," he offered. She wasn't a candidate, Charles said, and surprised himself. She was a person who told the truth. "For what it's worth." Victor said carefully, "Your intentions aren't unusual among men with your reach, and look how happy we all are," Charles said. But the sarcasm didn't land anywhere useful. Days passed in their efficient way. He tried to outwork the ache and found it immune to spreadsheets. The penthouse hummed. The refrigerator believed in mornings. He dreamed of boots tied with ribbon and woke to contracts that weren't signed. On the 4th day, the intercom buzzed. "A Ms. Antoinette," the doorman said, attempting neutral and failing. He met her in the lobby where air smelled like citrus and rules. The blue coat fit her better now. Or maybe she fit herself better inside it. She was holding a paper bag from the diner, and inside was a loaf of bread she'd bought with fresh bills and old pride. "I'm not selling a baby, Mr. Woodward," she said, voice low enough the orchids wouldn't overhear. "I'm selling you a chance to be human. Don't waste it." Her words landed like weather that decides the harvest. They went upstairs to a smaller conference room. The big one had felt like a stage he hadn't earned. Victor arrived with a cleaner draft. Her clinic, her decisions, her keys. Security on her terms, no spectacle. Respect spelled out plainly. Enough that even a future judge would blush at how obvious it sounded. Antoinette read every line, lips moving slightly. When she reached the last page, she didn't sign. She lifted the pen, balanced it between her fingers like a scale, and looked at Charles rather than the contract. "Change one line," she said. Victor's pen hovered mid-her. "Which line?" She nudged the final clause with the tip, the one that tried to turn a life into a handoff. "Either yours," she said, "or mine." The pen hung. The city held its breath. The page waited to decide whether it was paper or a door. The townhouse was small enough to memorize in a day, and bright enough to change the way a morning spoke. No marble, no concierge, no elevator that sighed like money. White walls, sun-warm wood, a square of backyard where mint poked up like resilience. When Antoinette stepped inside, Charles said, "Dignity, not display." It was the first time. He'd chosen less on purpose. She ran her hand along the kitchen counter and nodded. "Locks from the inside?" He handed her keys. "Only." At the community clinic, fluorescent lights hummed like bees that believed in mercy. Dr. Lena Armitage introduced herself without preamble or pity. A woman with gentle hands and a spine that made paperwork nervous. "Vitamins," she said. Tapping a list, regular meals. Rest that isn't just collapsing. And boundaries, especially with men who confuse contracts with care. She said it looking at Charles, not unkind, not joking. Antoinette smirked. Charles swallowed an argument that sounded like a spreadsheet and said, "Yes, doctor." Rumors outran caution. A blogger named Tessa Quill, whose smile looked legal until you read her captions, sniffed a story. A blurry photo outside the clinic. A headline with question marks that did the work of exclamation points. Victor called before breakfast. "Control the narrative," he said. "We can frame this as philanthropy, discretion, medical privacy pick too." Antoinette folded laundry at the kitchen table, the blue coat thrown over a chair like a flag. "I won't be anyone's headline," she said. "Not even a tasteful one." Charles lifted his phone, then put it down. "No press," he told Victor. "We wait." Victor sighed the sigh of a man who didn't believe in silence. The ultrasound room was dim, the kind of quiet that made machines sound like lullabies. Antoinette gripped the paper gown where it gaped. Charles stood useless and hopeful near the sink, rehearsing in his mind the right number of ahs to sound human. Gel, wand, grainy cosmos. Then the room filled with a rhythm that didn't fit on a calendar. Thrum, thrum distinct. Insistent, undeniable. Dr. Armitage blinked, then smiled like someone who just discovered a new country. "Well," she said softly, 3. The word hung, then multiplied. 3 heartbeats on the screen. 3 stairs from the porch to the path outside the clinic he'd never noticed until that moment. 3 spoons in the drawer back at the townhouse, one smaller than the others. That night, when Charles passed a playground, he heard a mother humming a lullaby he didn't know in a measure of 3. He laughed a startled, helpless sound, then covered his mouth like he'd broken protocol in a library. They rewrote A Life in Small Lessons. He attended birthing classes and could not, for the blessed life of him, swaddle a doll that looked smug in its plastic sleep. His first attempt resembled a burrito packed by a man with gloved hands and a grudge. Antoinette laughed so hard she had to sit. He tried again, tongue anchored to the corner of his mouth in concentration, but the doll kept wriggling free like a well-funded scandal. When he finally got it right, loose enough to breathe, snug enough to soothe, he looked up for approval. The way he had as a boy holding a strawberry he wasn't supposed to pick. "Not bad, Woodward," Antoinette said. He, who had been called many impressive things, felt that land better than any title. He noticed the blue coat thinning at the elbows as winter leaned in. Without thinking, he had a driver deliver 3 designer options that looked like commandments. Antoinette lifted one, weighed it, and set it down like a bright lie. "I'm not a problem to be replaced," she said. He started to argue quality, warmth, durability, but heard Whitlow in his head. "Plants don't read ledgers. They read hands." "You're right," he said, taking the boxes back to the door. "I meant gift." It came out erasure. She kept the coat. He learned to offer without removing. Victor tightened screws with the patience of a man building a cage. "Multiple births raise medical risk," he said, voice smooth as a signed check. "We need certainty. Have her sign the separation addendum now. Post-birth decisions are a legal swamp." The document lay on Charles's desk like a trap drawn by a master. Antoinette read it in silence, jaw working. "You want me to pre-consent to a life without them," she said. "Before I know their faces." Victor spread his hands. "We're protecting everyone." "Except me," she said. She didn't sign. A dizzy spell at the market tipped the day into sirens. The eyes swallowed them whole, monitors, curtains. The antiseptic smell of emergencies that arrive without RSVP. Charles stood at the side of the bed and listened to the beeps translate worry into numbers he couldn't manage. Dr. Armitage appeared. "Like a lighthouse. Hydration," she said. "Overexertion. We're keeping her overnight for monitoring." He nodded too fast. He brought ice chips. He watched Antoinette sleep with her hand on her stomach, as if greeting from both sides. Something in his chest unclenched and then cramped in the same second. He cared beyond contract. The realization didn't make him noble, it made him honest. They tried names on their tongues the way people try rooms in a house they might buy. Antoinette spoke first. "Soft ones," she said. "Not names that arrive already shouting." She tested syllables that felt like light through leaves. He offered possibilities that sounded like trusts. She winced. He laughed. "They circled 3 candidates and promised to revisit when we see their faces." A vow that turned naming into waiting, not owning. The world pressed closer. Tessa Quill posted a grainy shot of the townhouse window, 3 silhouettes on a wall made by a nurse arranging in 4-pole. "Triplets?" her caption asked, weaponizing wonder. Victor escalated. He arrived with a new plan in a leather folder that smelled like outcomes. "Post-birth separation timeline," he said. "Transportation protocols. NDAs for medical staff. A private NICU arrangement we control." He spoke with the calm of a man who had never held a newborn skin to skin. Antoinette read the pages. There was a paragraph about immediate transfer for safety. There was a sentence about limiting maternal contact to support transition. The ink was colder than January. "This reads like kidnapping," she said softly. No one contradicted her. Victor looked at Charles. "Well?" Charles looked at the door, at the window, at the floor. He said nothing. Silence proved easier to notarize than remorse. It lasted 3 heartbeats, hers the baby's, and his, before Antoinette's mouth trembled into a line. She folded the plan with meticulous care, like a letter she didn't intend to send, and placed it on the table between them, the way a person sets down something sharp, so it won't be mistaken for a toy. "You plan to take them and disappear," she whispered. He didn't deny it. His training had always rewarded what he could defend on paper. This, he realized too late, required a different defense entirely. The room narrowed to the width of the contract. 3 monitors down the hall kept time. The blue coat hung on the back of a chair like a witness. Can a heart that calculates learn to choose before the ink chooses for it? I have to correct the record. When I told you about the addendum, the one Victor called certainty and Antoinette called kidnapping, I let you believe it was simply a lawyer's instinct that got out of hand. That makes me tidy. It is not true. I designed that clause before the first ultrasound, before the townhouse keys, before the soup cooled under the bridge. I asked for sole custody, clean severance, in the very first draft and told Victor to make it look humane, legacy clean. That was the phrase in my email. I wrote it like a man writing a shipping label. I planned to erase her, even as I handed her a blanket and pretended I didn't count favors. I know where I learned this. The mirror sits just behind the memory, and it has my father's handprints on it. He did what I tried to do. He paid a desperate woman to leave after delivery. She was my mother. By the time I was old enough to ask, silence had already accepted the position of mothering me. The house told a story about a widow and a legacy that required interruptions to be hushed. The portraits nodded along. Your mother died, people said, as if grief were a ledger. Entry you post once. It was almost true. She left a small box of things, ribboned shut, and a letter with my name on it in a handwriting that mistook my future for kindness. I didn't open it. I put it where I put anything that didn't reconcile, behind books, beneath reports, under. The part of myself I learned not to ask about. I opened it yesterday. The paper had yellowed the way unspoken things do. The envelope clung to its own edges. Inside, the voice I had been missing didn't arrive like thunder. It arrived like a hand I almost didn't recognize, reaching anyway. Charles, your father is a precise man. He will keep you fed and educated and safe. He will teach you to name the pieces of things and to place them where they belong. He will not show you where to put your loneliness. That is not his language. I did not leave you because I did not love you. I left because I was bought. I agreed to be paid for my absence so that you would be allowed a name that opens doors. I was told it would be cleaner this way, that men would respect you more if they never saw the muddiness of women. I believed them long enough to sign. I was hungry. I was frightened. I was told a story about how love is a stain on certain papers. Names are more than assets, sweetheart. They are also bridges. One day you will learn that a clean legacy is a cracked vessel glued with lies. When you are offered a simple story, ask what was left out to make it simple. When you hear the words efficiency and love in the same sentence, put your hand on your own heart and listen for the part that refuses to be filed. If you ever want to find me, do not bring a lawyer. Bring a question in your unarmored voice. Your mother, who's not a myth, the letter didn't accuse him. It unstitched me. I reread scenes I had told in my favor and saw the edits. Under the bridge, I had called it bread before business, as if I were translating Whitlow's kindness into a ritual I understood. I forgot to say the ribbon on Antoinette's boot came from a child's birthday present she couldn't afford, but attended anyway, because showing up is a currency not everyone recognizes. At the ultrasound, I reported my laughter like a surprise I had earned, but I left out that she took my hand first when the third heartbeat arrived and said, "You're not alone in this," as if I needed permission to feel anything at all. With the coats, I framed my apology as learning. I did not tell you she wore the blue one to the courthouse to testify for another woman whose landlord kept losing her receipts. Antoinette's bravery made my generosity look small, so I cropped it. You should also know why she flinches at paper. In a borrowed living room with a couch that smelled like old sleep, she told me about a little brother who learned to read the world by her eyes. Foster homes opened and closed like bad weather. Whenever forms arrived, someone's voice got colder. Social workers rotated through the door with clipboards that never asked how he liked his eggs. She learned to keep their bags packed halfway and their hearts packed tighter than that. One spring, while she was at a shift she couldn't afford to miss, a decision got filed without her. He was placed permanently. She learned about permanence the way most people learn about fire. Papers take people, she said. They don't even apologize for it. That is why NDAs feel like locks to her and contracts smell like stolen hours. I visited a shelter after the letter undid me. Antoinette wasn't there that day. I met Sister Miriam, a woman whose habit was the only thing about her that obeyed rules. She poured coffee with the competence of a dock foreman and said, "When?" I tried to sound familiar with redemption. You can't buy a family. You can only show up for one. She looked at my hands when she said it, as if checking whether they knew how to carry anything that couldn't be insured. That night, I built a fire in the townhouse living room because the air had turned mean. And the babies were kicking like a prophecy. I took the contract from my briefcase and held a match over it. The flame hesitated, a bright, obedient thing that wanted instructions. I saw the exact spot where the paper would black and curl and give. I saw the soot it would leave and the story I would tell about choosing better. The match burned my fingers first. I shook it out by reflex. Habit put the contract back in the folder. Habit slid the folder under the couch. Habit is a strong country. The storm arrived early. Labor started with a flinch that turned into a wave that didn't ask the shore's opinion. The sky folded itself into rain. Traffic buckled. Victor called as if he'd been waiting just outside the frame, which he probably had. Hospital. Signatures ready, he said. We move now. My team will take her. We can avoid a circus. Antoinette was breathing like everything she'd ever survived had been practice. I'm not getting in their car, she said between clenched teeth. I'm not delivering a headline. Another contraction hit, stole the world, and left it changed. Sirens found us. The ambulance smelled like rails and promises. A paramedic with a tattoo of a small bird on her wrist took Antoinette's hand and said, "We've got you." Victor's men waited at the curb with umbrellas that looked like rules. The paramedic shut the doors on them kindly and completely. The ambulance pulled away. Rain erased our tire tracks instantly, as if privacy were finally doing us a favor. I stood on the curb holding nothing, no pen, no authority over the next 10 minutes. The folder under the couch might as well have been a loaded question. If you truly love them, her, the three faces I haven't seen yet, which paper will you sign and which will you destroy? Hospitals at night wear their own weather. Floodlights bleach the windows, hallways shine like wet runways, and every door breathes urgency. We hit labor and delivery at a sprint that wasn't quite running, wheels chattering. Nurses making space the way professionals do when the future arrives loud. Antoinette's hand clamps around mine, and then the rail, then mine again. A monitor throws a green script against the wall, her heart, the baby's hearts, the room itself keeping time. The first cry we hear isn't a cry. It's a siren somewhere else. Inside this room, the sound is rubber saws, metal trays, the word pressure said like a promise. Then a nurse frowns at the screen. Decil on baby B, she says, calm. But tighter. The room tightens with her. Another nurse answers, reposition. They angle Antoinette's body. The line wobbles, dips, tries to climb. I can't breathe, and I can't stop breathing. I become inventory 10 fingers, 2 useless eyes, 1 heart that keeps choosing panic. A nurse steps to the doorway and blocks it with her shoulder. She's all competence, all kindness, and all business. Clipboard, pen. Are you the father? Or the legal guardian? She asks. The boxes are small. Their consequences are not. Father or legal guardian, not the same. One is blood or the belief in it. The other is possession with paperwork. I see the clause I wrote, sole custody, clean severance, like a bruise under fluorescent light. I see my father's signature on a different night 30 years ago, making a different woman disappear. I see Sister Miriam pouring coffee and telling me you can't buy a family, you can only show up for one. I look at Antoinette. Her eyes are storm-tired, scalpel honest. Don't make my babies a transaction, those eyes say, and I know she hasn't said it yet, but she will. The pen is heavier than any fountain pen I own. I check father. The nurse nods and stripes a bracelet around my wrist. The plastic bites. Soft, it feels like a gate opening. We are rearranged by urgency. Someone wheels in a warmer that looks like a spaceship. Someone else hangs another bag on a silver hook. Dr. Armitage appears with her steadiness and says, triplets make their own rules. We're going to help them follow the good ones. She looks at the monitor. Baby B is shy about oxygen. Let's coax. A contraction takes Antoinette like a wave takes a shoreline. She rides it with a sound that makes me understand why. Language invented prayer. Between surges, she turns her head, finds me. Don't leave, she says. Never, I say, and feel the word draft a new contract inside my chest. The door opens the way bad news envelopes open cleanly, efficiently. Victor walks in wearing certainty. Behind him, a court officer with a seal on his jacket, a notary with a stamp like a small hammer. Victor holds a folder the color of outcomes. He speaks low and fast as if speed is mercy. We can finalize before delivery, Charles, less liability. Sign here, she signs there. Clean custody by morning. The word clean ricochets off tile. The court officer produces forms. The notary moistens a stamp pad with the gravity of a man who has never swaddled anything. Get out, Dr. Armitage says without raising her voice. This is a medical room. Victor adopts the smile he keeps for judges. Medical, legal, they happen together, doctor. Antoinette is sweating, eyes half-masted, mouth set against the next wave. She forces the words out anyway. Don't make my baby's a transaction. I take the folder. The weight is familiar. The contents are poison I brewed. The nurse adjusts a sensor. The monitor beeps its decisions. The room is a bowl. Everything poured into it tastes like now. Charles, Victor says, a warning wrapped in a name. If you don't sign, we lose control of what? I ask and hear something new in my voice. A fracture, and beneath it, a foundation. He gestures to the court officer. Of the narrative, of custody, of liabilities. Multiple births complicate. People complicate, I say. They also belong to each other. A cry slices the air. It is not one of us. It is the first of them. Baby A arrives with a trumpet of outrage and relief. A red mouth announcing a country that suddenly exists. The room tilts toward light. Someone says girl, and someone else says she's perfect, and I swear the ceiling drops an inch to hear better. A second later, a second cry higher, breathier, as if blowing out candles at the world's quietest party. Baby B coaxed. Into oxygen and victory. Boy, someone says. Good tone. He's stubborn. I love him exactly for that. Then the third. A sound like a question and an answer at once. Baby another girl, the small crown of her head steaming in the air like a miracle you can measure. 3 bracelets appear. 3 tiny caps. 3 heavily gloved hands doing 6 careful things at once. A nurse asks for names, and the past unrolls a kitchen night. The townhouse, lamplight, flour dust somehow on the counter without anyone baking. Both of us testing soft choices aloud. June, I say, pointing to baby A, because her arrival was summer in a room of winter lights. Rowan, Antoinette says for baby B, because he fought for breath and will fight for anything that matters. Mayra, we say together for baby C, because seeing her feels like seeing everything. 3 bracelets, June, Rowan, Mira. The letters look too big for them and exactly right for us. Victor clears his throat like a man offended by human noise. He edges closer with the folder. "Congratulations," he says, tone already trying to own the word. "Now I do not remember deciding. I remember Whitlow's hands. Dirt in the lines, showing me how to pinch a spent bloom so the plant has a chance. I remember my mother's letter. Names are more than assets, sweetheart. They are also bridges. I remember the nurse's boxes and the box I checked with my soul. I put the folder on the supply table, open it, and withdraw the contract. The paper looks thinner under fluorescent light, like a bluff called. I hold it where everyone can see Victor, the court officer, the notary, Dr. Armitage, the nurses, the babies who will not remember, but will inherit the weather of this room. Then I tear. It's not a dramatic movie rip. Legal paper tears like cloth that resists before it yields. It becomes snow only after you insist. First one long strip, then two, then four. My hands are steady. The sound is a zipper letting future air into a sealed past. Gasps Bloom nurse, resident, court officer. Someone says, "Sir," like I've broken an actual law. Maybe I have. I keep tearing until what remains cannot be reconstructed on a clever scanner. Victor stares as if I've ripped currency. In a way, I have. You can't just. He begins. I can, I say, and I did. The court officer steps forward, guarded. "Mr. Woodward, the court recognizes. The court recognizes what I sign next," I say, "which will be this." I take the notary's pen. He doesn't move to stop me. He looks relieved, like a man who's been waiting for permission to witness something worth witnessing. "New document," I tell Dr. Armitage. "Hospital has templates for co-parenting declarations?" She nods once, brisk. "We do." A nurse produces the form from a drawer that might as well be a drawer of miracles. We write as if writing can smuggle justice into the world. Equal parental rights, shared medical decision-making. No media releases without both signatures. A trust that can only be accessed by two pens in agreement, hers and mine for health, education, and the 1,000 unpredictable mercies children need. There's a line about protection from PR exploitation. There's a line about primary residence. There's a line that says the family is not a campaign. Antoinette, between contractions and recoveries, reads each clause like a woman who understands how paper can steal. She adds one sentence the way you add a brace to a beam, in all conflicts. Between profit and the children's welfare, the latter controls. Perfect, I say, and I mean the sentence and the person who wrote it. We sign. The notary stamps with ceremony, as if knighting a promise. The sound is small. The meaning is not. Victor exhales in disbelief that wants to be anger. "You are inviting litigation," he says. "You're exposing yourself, the assets, then sue me," I tell him. "Sue me for being a father." It comes out easy. True things often do, once you stop negotiating with them. "Get out," I add, and this time I am not a client. I am a man unmuzzled. "Effective immediately, you're done. We'll settle. Accounts later, or not." The court officer shifts his weight. I meet his look and find, to my surprise, not opposition, but the professional neutrality of someone who has watched worse men do far less brave things. He nods almost imperceptibly and steps back. Victor tries one more door. "You'll regret this," he says, because men like him believe regret is a lever they can pull on anyone. "I already regret everything that made this necessary," I say. "That's enough regret for one lifetime," he leaves. The door clicks, the room exhales. Now there are 3 small humans making small human noises. Antoinette looks like the weather after a storm-thin light. Broken branches, the scent of rain, the sky deciding to be a sky again. She watches me the way people watch bridges they are about to test with their full weight. No more ledger. I say, and the words feel like tearing and building at once. No more purchase orders. Stay, not as a surrogate or a scandal. As their mother, as my partner if you choose me. If you don't, I'll still be what I just signed to be. But I'm asking for a family, not buying one. The request hangs between us. It is public nurses, resident, notary, Dr. Armitage, the beeping machines. It is irreversible. Paper says so, but more than paper, the people in this room will tell this story later in break rooms and at dinner tables, and it will fossilize into truth. It is cinematic, the floodlights outside, the snow of torn contract at my shoes, the 3 tiny bracelets on the warmer that has finally stopped looking like a spaceship and started looking like furniture. Antoinette closes her eyes for a breath, opens them for another life. The wariness in them is not a wall now. It's a gate waiting for a password. I don't have one. I have only a history I am learning to tell in full. She doesn't answer with words first. She nods to the nurse, who helps her shift. Skin to skin, Dr. Armitage says, and places June against Antoinette's chest. The room alters its gravity around the site. Come here, Antoinette says finally, voice frayed and intent. Bring Rowan. I do. His fist is the size of a debt paid and forgiven. He squints up as if memorizing me. Mira sighs in her warmer, a sound like the end of snowfall. For the first time in years, I don't know how to use my hands except honestly. I slide a chair close, lean in so the 3 of them can hear something that isn't a monitor. A lullaby presents itself, unpracticed. I don't remember learning it. Maybe my mother sang it and my bones kept the tune when my mind didn't. It comes out clumsy, which is to say true. The notes are a little flat. My voice is a little cracked. I hum anyway. The monitors take the tempo, and even the beeps start to believe this is a rhythm worth keeping. Antoinette watches me, then glances at the torn paper on the floor and back at the bracelets. Her mouth shapes a tired smile. In it are 19 years of closed doors, and the next 19 years of ones we will open. I can try, she says. It is the bravest sentence a human can offer another. It is also yes. The old man in me, the one who wrote contracts that erased women, the one who believed efficiency could do love's job, sits down and goes quiet. The boy in me, the one with strawberries in his palm and dirt on his shoes, stands up. I rest my forehead against Antoinette's temple. Rowan's breath feathers my wrist. June's hand finds her mother's collarbone. Mira makes a sound that might be a laugh in a language we will learn together. Floodlights bleach the night outside. But inside, the light is something we make ourselves. Paper can take people. Paper can also set them free. Today we used it properly. I didn't buy a family. I asked for one and waited to be chosen. The years did not arrive in grand announcements. They came as cereal on the floor, socks that refused to match, and a parade of tiny shoes by the door that grew a half size at a time. The park bench learned our names from the way we returned to it. 3 small figures conquering the slide in formation. Antoinette reading with one eye and spotting with the other, and me, the old man with a backpack full of snacks and apologies for the pigeons. On good days, the air tasted like oranges. On windy ones, the twins argued about who the wind liked best. Mira solved it. It likes all of us because we're loud. The blue coat hangs by the door now. The elbow mends done by Antoinette's. Careful hand show like scars a family agrees to keep. No one wears it much. It belongs to an older weather. But we touch it as we pass, the way you pat a faithful animal, and it forgives our new lives for their brightness. It is a keepsake, not a pity gift. A proof we did not erase what carried us here. Breakfast is our loudest prayer. Rowan cracks eggs like negotiations. June appoints herself minister of toast. Mira sings the butter knife into behaving. Antoinette sips her coffee and smiles at the chaos as if every spilled drop were a vote of confidence. I used to believe mornings were for optimizing. Now I believe they are for arrivals. The three of them arrive every day, again and again, with the same surprise I felt in the hospital when a room turned into a world. We replanted Whitlow's garden last spring. 3 young trees in a row, shouldering their way into sky. A birch for the way light plays on persistence, a maple for patience, an apple because the future should feed you. We tucked a triangle of strawberries into the corner where the sun lingers. I showed them how to press the soil around each crown with the heel of a hand, how to water early and quit while the day is still deciding. Plants don't read ledgers. They read hands, I said, and this time I didn't hear a ghost. I heard a guide. Small palms patted earth with solemn ceremony. Red smudges later on 3 mouths were our amen. On quiet mornings, rare but real, I finished the recording I promised them. The microphone hears what a page cannot. The breath between words, the hesitation when you refuse an old lie. The silver tube that once hid what I nearly became sits empty on the shelf. I kept it to remember what absence looks like when you give it a container and call it order. The torn contract never returned to it. Ash does not obey the shapes you wish you'd chosen earlier. The hospital bracelets remain. June, Rowan, Mira. I keep them in a shallow bowl by the window, where the sun can practice saying their names. Sometimes, when the house is still enough to hear our refrigerator's faithful hymn, I open my mother's letter one last time. The paper has softened at the folds where my thumb has learned the path of regret into gratitude. Names are more than assets, she wrote. The sentence has broken bread with us for years now. Today I add my own note and tuck it behind hers, so the children will someday find both voices braided together. You are not investments. You are invitations. We sign our days with the ways we show up for each other. When the world offers you clean stories, ask what was left out to make them shine. When someone says efficiency and love in the same breath, listen for the part of you that refuses to be filed. Names are more than assets. I slide the envelope back and watch a dust mote settle on it like a seal. Then someone shouts from the hallway about a missing shoe, and history puts on its raincoat and follows us outside. We return to the park bench. The birch flashes its coins of light. The apple tree shows off new leaves like shy hands. June declares the clouds are ships. Rowan insists they're dragons. Mira says wisely, maybe they're both until we know. Antoinette threads her arm through mine. Her laugh arrives before the joke, the way a door opens before you've decided you're brave enough to knock. We have not perfected anything. We have improved our aim. If you asked me to tie it back to the prologue, to the man who walked past a woman in a blue coat and thought he was protecting a schedule, I would say this: being held is not a skill you master. It is a permission you give. I did not learn it from books or ledgers or elegant rooms. I learned it from 3 heartbeats on a dark screen, from a woman who refused to be erased, from a letter that waited decades and still arrived on time. I carry questions the way other men carry money clips. They fit any pocket and weigh what you let them. Here is the one that will not leave me. Did I save Antoinette, or did she save me? Or did you 3 save us both? The children are arguing about strawberries again. The blue coat catches a little sun. The silver tube winks from the shelf, empty and harmless. I press stop on the recorder and watch the light through the leaves make ideas on the kitchen wall. Some papers bind, others free. The only ones worth signing are written in the margins of a life you're brave enough to share.